Playwright Anton Chekhov famously said, "Never place a loaded rifle on stage if it isn't going to go off." In other words, every detail must be relevant, and every setup should have a payoff. Thus, the narrative principle of Chekhov's gun was born. But it isn't always a gun. Chekhov's Whatever is a podcast where myself and guests watch a movie and try to predict what role Chekhov's gun will play. Welcome to Chekhov's Whatever. Hello and welcome to Chekhov's Whatever, the podcast that makes a game of movies and storytelling. I'm your host, Meg Mazeski. Here with me today to talk about the 2025 action-adventure movie Fountain of Youth is Jen Deats. Welcome back to the podcast, Jen.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
You have the honor of being the second person to be inducted into the Two Timers Club.
Woohoo!
Everyone should check out episode 4, Woman of the Hour, which was also with Jen. Jen and I used to co-host Indoors Women, a pop culture podcast, which you can still find on your podcast player of choice. Jen, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I used to be a podcaster and I'm an archaeologist, so I'm, especially good at evaluating movies of this type. I don't know.
Very qualified for this movie, yes.
And yeah, that's about it. But I'm looking forward to getting into this movie with you.
Me too. Yes. I can't wait to hear your opinion on Fountain of Youth. This is a 2025 action-adventure movie made for Apple TV+. It's about a treasure hunting mastermind who assembles a team to find the legendary Fountain of Youth. But to outwit and outrun threats at every turn, he'll need someone even smarter than he is, his estranged sister. This movie stars John Krasinski, Natalie Portman, Isa Gonzalez, Domhnall Gleeson, and for a hot second, Stanley Tucci. I think he was a little bit out of their budget to pay him for an entire movie.
Yeah, they had his voice on the radio at one point, and then he shows up for about 10 seconds.
Yes. This movie was directed by Guy Ritchie. At time of recording, it has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 36% from critics and a 41% audience score. Yowza. Jen, did you have any expectations for this movie that I foisted upon you?
Well, the problem with this movie is that it has so many things I enjoy, like action adventure and like fake bullshit archaeology stuff. And John Krasinski and Natalie Portman, though Natalie Portman is definitely an expert at being a super giant bummer in an otherwise fun movie. So I was like, whatever, Natalie Portman. But also it just like seemed like a crazy fun it just like wasn't as crazy or fun as I wanted it to be. Maybe it was crazy, but it wasn't as fun.
I think that's a fair summary. This movie got on my radar because of the algorithm. They served me an ad somewhere online about this treasure hunting movie. So the algorithm knows that I am like treasure hunting pilled right now. I am like neck deep in trying to find a real life treasure through this book called There's Treasure Inside by John Collins Black. John Collins Black was inspired by the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt, also a recent contemporary treasure hunt. So anyway, I'm deep down that rabbit hole, and my phone knew this treasure movie, it'll get her. And like you said, it has the hallmarks of a fun movie. It looks like Indiana Jones. It looks like The Mummy. It looks like National Treasure.
National Treasure. It tried to be all of those things, but just not very well.
Yeah, it felt like a copy of a copy of a copy. And it's like, this movie can be done well, even if it's been done a million times, but it didn't quite have like the same verve. I was also excited about the cast, despite, like you said, Natalie Portman often being cast as the sort of shrewish killjoy among the ensemble. But I still like her work overall and was hopeful to see her in this movie. I like Domhnall Gleeson. I love Guy Ritchie. Sherlock Holmes from 2009 remains one of my favoriteest films ever. Guilty pleasure film. But so yeah, I had high hopes for this movie. But
so like casting back to an episode of Indoors Women, I'm remembering that you have kind of a block against Domhnall Gleeson in a lot of movies. Like we were naming movies he's in and you're like, he's in that? He's in that? So I'm wondering how long it's going to be before you've completely forgotten that he was part of this movie.
Yeah, probably not that long. I think in that episode I said I'd only seen one other movie with him in it. And then I was like, oh no, wait, I've seen like a bajillion.
He's everywhere.
Have you been on the Rise of the Resistance ride in Disneyland?
Yes, I have.
So there's this one part where your shuttle is being boarded by the First Order, and there's this officer who is speaking to you, and all of a sudden she's like shoulder checked aside by General Hux, aka Domhnall Gleeson. He's just like, "You rebel scum," and just the way that he body checks that poor actress, it strikes me as very funny every time I see it. And I think that performance on that ride has endeared Domhnall Gleeson to me, so maybe I won't forget
Maybe
him
he's
going
in
forward.
your memory now, and it's not like those one aliens where like you don't know humans or other aliens remember them, and like you can't store information about them in the computer. Like it came up on Voyager, and I think they were also maybe on Next Generation. But yeah, who knows? Who remembers? But yeah, I think that you had that block against him, so hopefully he's in there now. He's cemented.
Apologies to Domhnall Gleeson. But before we get into Fountain of Youth, here's a quick refresher on how Chekhov's Whatever works. This is a podcast where myself and the guest watch and review a movie that's new to us. We also play a game where we try to guess what Chekhov's gun will be and how it will play out later in the movie. Chekhov's gun is a plot element that must have a setup and a payoff. That setup usually happens in Act 1, and the payoff typically comes later in Act 3. A Chekhov's gun is also typically a concrete item, action, or person rather than something symbolic or thematic. And finally, a Chekhov's gun should move the plot forward. We get 2 points if we correctly identify a Chekhov's gun. We also get an additional point if we correctly guess how that Chekhov's gun will pay off. And finally, we lose 1 point if we incorrectly identify a Chekhov's gun and its role. Whoever has the most points at the end of the movie wins.
I thought this movie, for being all about like, here are some objects and their importance, I found it really hard to identify Chekhov's guns throughout. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a block of mine, but I thought I was either like thinking too obvious things, or like I was like thinking beyond, and then the movie like delivered more obvious things. I don't know, but I don't think I'm winning this game.
I don't think I am either, just because I did not have many guesses, but we'll see how it shakes out. Fountain of Youth, we start in Bangkok, Thailand with Luke, John Krasinski, our main character. He's on a motorbike being chased by Thai gangsters who want the painting he's stolen. A car chase ensues, and we're treated to the first of many Guy Ritchie-esque action scenes. After the car chase, he escapes on a train. So this is our first impression of Luke. He is meant to be, witty and roguish, comes off a little bit smug to me. So already he's not totally endeared to me, but at least the movie does start off with a bang. I enjoyed the action scenes at the outset, the environmental set pieces, the scene in Bangkok, and also on the train. I like how they used the environment in the fight scenes.
I liked it, but it's maybe not as impressive as I wanted it to be, just because I've been watching a lot of Missions Impossible, because I watched the most recent Mission Impossible, and then we started going through them backwards. And the stunts in those movies are just very impressive, and so I was kind of like, oh yeah, this is a pretty good chase scene. But I don't know, I just like wasn't automatically like on board with the character and like interested in what he was doing. I don't know. John Krasinski kind of let me down a little bit in this movie. He wasn't as roguish and handsome and, Brendan Fraser in The Mummy-ish as I wanted him to be.
I do think he would have benefited from being more goofy. I get it. I get when an actor wants to work outside of typecast. And obviously, John Krasinski is best known for The Office. He was a goofy character pulling faces at the camera all the time. But let's be real, he did that really well, and it makes sense for him to be in similarly goofy roles. I do think this character would have benefited from leaning more toward goofy Brendan Fraser rather than rakish Indiana Jones. I don't think that John Krasinski was able to pull off the charming rogue quality.
It's like no one is funny like Harrison Ford is funny. Harrison Ford is just funny when he says anything. He's just like one of those people. Like he says something, and the way he says it makes it funny. And John Krasinski kind of has that quality, but like not in like an action context. And I know he has like an action show that's on Prime Video, but I haven't seen it, so I don't usually think of him being in that action context either.
I haven't seen the Jack Ryan show either, so I remain to be convinced whether John Krasinski can be an action star or not.
Also, Harrison Ford played Jack Ryan, so it's like,
true.
Really, you're going to measure up to that?
Exactly. On the train that he has escaped to, he has a dream of a golden sun-faced mask, and he seems mesmerized by it. We learn later that this is an Inti sun god mask, and it was a mask that his father had pursued for quite a while.
So I was like, Chekhov's Inti mask. So when he's having the dream about the mask, I was like, we're not actually seeing the physical mask at this point, but I was like, oh, this has to be important. Like, this has to be a clue along the lines of finding the Fountain of Youth. So I thought that this Inti mask would somehow unlock the Fountain of Youth. And somehow we have like a whole bunch of different mythologies and continents and travel going on. But I thought it was definitely promising as a way to unlock the fountain in the end.
Yeah, when I saw this dream, I wasn't sure yet if it was prophetic or if it was a memory. It does end up being quite symbolic of like letting things go. But I think that's a good guess. It's obviously going to come back in some way later.
I was also like, we're not actually seeing an object. We're seeing this vision of an object. And so I was like, I don't know if this counts, but I assumed we would then see the actual object soon and then I could expand on it. But yeah, we never really did.
On the train, Luke is intercepted by Esme, Isa Gonzalez, although I don't think they ever actually say her name in the movie. She sits by him and says that she recovers rare and unique paintings like the one that he has just stolen. Basically, she says, hey, we can do this the hard way or we can do this the easy way. And he's like, oh, I'm doing it the hard way. So then we get a hand-to-hand fight on the train. It's awkwardly flirtatious between them as they fight each other.
I feel like they had to mention in the movie several times that he was interested in her and that they had chemistry because I wasn't seeing any of that chemistry. Like later, they have to specifically say the word chemistry out loud. Like they had to be like, these people have chemistry, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, because they did not sell it. There were no sparks. No
Nope.
sparks. He manages to escape. We get a title card with the name of the movie. Our next scene is in London. We meet Charlotte, as played by Natalie Portman. She is in the middle of divorce proceedings with her husband, who is arguing over custody of their son, Thomas. When Charlotte goes back to her job as a curator at the National Gallery, Luke is there waiting for her. And we have maybe the worst scene of exposition I've ever seen. He says, it's been almost a year. Can't a brother drop in to see his kid sister? How's the family? Young Thomas. And the husband? Henry? This is legit dialogue from the movie. And I'm just like, no one talks like this. No one talks like this.
So many times during the movie, I was like, people don't speak this way. And also, I feel like they did a real disservice, like making them brother and sister. They could have had the classic, like, two leads who, like, maybe know each other from before and, like, get to know each other and have romantic tension. And I think no one has romantic tension, and that's one of the things I expect from these movies is like a fun romantic tension, like, Romancing the Stone, all of these kinds of movies, like that's what happens. Even Jumanji. Like I think that they could have done better with that.
When I saw the initial ad served to me, it was just a static ad, so it wasn't video or anything, and I assumed that Natalie Portman and John Krasinski were going to be love interests because that did just make the most sense to me. And it wasn't until I watched the trailer that I was like, oh, they're siblings. But more to the point of what you're saying, I think it drills down to this movie just needed more tension between the characters in general. And I think they could have mined the sibling tension better. But I don't think they really delivered on that either, ultimately.
Yeah, that they had been estranged and that they disagree with, like, what happened with their father and stuff. And also John Krasinski was like very pointedly dressed, kind of like Indiana Jones when he's a professor, with like the vest and the round glasses. And I was like, really? Come on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, speaking of their father, we get some backstory in this scene. The siblings and their dad used to go on treasure hunting adventures together years ago. Luke doesn't approve of his sister's safe and predictable life choices in the meantime, like her straight-laced museum curator job. He thinks that she's just sitting on the sidelines and not truly living her life, whereas Charlotte doesn't approve of how Luke is always chasing the next big thrill. She thinks he'll never be satisfied and that he's only in it for the prestige and the thrill of the chase. She also disapproves of how Luke has criminalized their father's teachings and legacy. Also, their dad was all about the journey, not the prize at the end. I mention all of this just because this is rehashed a lot throughout the movie. This is the main tension between the two siblings, is what to do about their father's legacy, how to interpret that legacy, and how to come to terms with how they both disapprove of each other's lives.
It was very clunky. Like you said about the exposition, it was just clunky throughout, like explaining everything. And in this type of movie, you have to explain a lot of stuff. You have to explain history and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Dan Brown movies are popping into my head. Like all these movies, like that are maybe not even that great, they're better than this. They do this better. I'm like, there's a lot of templates for doing this a little bit better. In Sherlock Holmes, they have to explain a lot of stuff.
That's true.
Like it just wasn't being explained all that well.
I enjoy the treasure hunting mumbo jumbo in movies like this. And honestly, I think it could have benefited more from more mumbo jumbo explanation, even if it didn't make any sense. I wanted to see more of the clues, more of the clever connections they're making between things, stuff like that.
And as we go forward, I'll talk about these things, but I feel like I won the game of figuring out the clues before they did a few times.
Yeah.
but the Chekhov's whatever game, I think I lost, but I definitely figured out several clues before they, or like what was going to be a plot point.
Yes.
Or what was going to happen next before it was obvious in the movie. So I was like, oh, at least I got that.
Yeah.
Figure those things out.
Luke steals a Rembrandt painting from the museum and urges Charlotte to come with him. She refuses. She says, no, I'm absolutely not going with you. Gilligan cut to a car chase scene. He thinks that this will entice her back to her old adventurous life. They meet up with their dad's old team and they analyze the painting, but there's nothing there. Luke drugs Charlotte and then drops her off on a bench.
Like you do.
Yes.
With your sister.
My first guess is Chekhov's knockout gas.
Oh, that's a good one.
I feel like it's practically a gun. I'm like, oh, it's like a fun spy weapon. I feel like this will come back in some way. My guess for the payoff is that Charlotte will finally take a page out of her brother's book and neutralize a bad guy using the gas. So that'll be her way of demonstrating to Luke that she's not a fuddy-duddy after all. Back at the museum, Interpol is investigating Luke's art heists and are shocked to discover that the painting had already been returned right under their noses. Let's not dwell on that. We'll just pretend like that just makes sense, that it would be back in its place.
Yeah, like they had to knock her out and put her on the bench outside, but somehow would that have exonerated her from stealing the painting if she was just right there but knocked out? I don't know. I was just like, and then they're all like zooming in and then they zoom in on the faces. And I'm like, this isn't an exciting scene. They're just trying to make it exciting.
Totally. But yes, it does not exonerate Charlotte. She is fired and her husband is even more convinced that she shouldn't have custody of their son. Charlotte tracks down Luke and his team, Deb, Murph, and the new addition to the team, a billionaire by the name of Owen Carver, as played by Domhnall Gleeson. I see you, Domhnall.
Who?
Yeah, who? They're looking for the Fountain of Youth. Charlotte is appropriately incredulous and also very disapproving. Owen explains that he's bankrolling the operation because he's dying of liver cancer, so he sees this as his last chance. Treasure hunting mumbo jumbo ensues. We get exposition about the so-called protectors of the path, who under direction from God are keeping the way to the fountain a secret.
Last Crusade.
I know, right?
Half of this movie is the plot of Last Crusade.
It's true.
Maybe 3/4 of the movie.
It's a lot of it. They crib a lot of this from Indiana Jones. But 6 artists have hidden clues to the path in their paintings. Luke has been acquiring these paintings, but the Rembrandt he stole from Charlotte was a duplicate and therefore did not contain a clue. So he needs her help finding the original painting. She reluctantly gives him a lead to someone by the name of Vanderbilt, who is on the Lusitania. I see Jen covering her face.
They bring the Lusitania up from because they have infinite money, and it wasn't even a big plot point. They're like, cut to the Lusitania rising from the bottom of the ocean. I was like, okay, go ahead.
Yes. Esme tracks Luke down. She tries to warn him that he's playing with powers that are beyond his comprehension and warns him to stop. We get more cringy flirting, ?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote my notes. They have less chemistry than ... I was apparently planning to write a clever metaphor there, but yeah, less chemistry than...
He has more chemistry with his sister. No, he has more chemistry with a cup of water in his dream than he does with this girl, which is, we haven't talked about that dream yet, but yeah.
We've already drawn a lot of comparisons to Indiana Jones. I will continue to also draw a lot of comparisons to The Mummy. It's at this point where I'm like, okay, this character of Esme, she's the Oded Fair character, or the Ardith Bay character in The Mummy, who was part of the Magi clan or group who was tasked with keeping humanity safe from powers they don't understand. Because we get the sense in this scene that she's not really a bad guy. Sure, she's an antagonist to Luke, but she means well. She's warning him. She doesn't really want to kill him. She's just there for some sort of higher purpose. She's a protector. And of course, we can't have the good guy fall in love with the bad guy now, can we?
And also, we can also draw the parallel to Last Crusade, the knights who are tasked with keeping the Grail safe and keeping knowledge of the Grail controlled, and the head of that, they're working against Indiana Jones because he's trying to find the Grail, but they're also not bad people. It's so similar.
I feel like this must be a trope in every treasure hunting movie. But I can't come up with other examples off the top of my head, but you have to have the competing teams all converging on the treasure at the same time, and you have to have the protectors, and but sometimes it works.
And like the really rich guy is always like a really bad guy.
Also in this scene, I have my second Chekhov's whatever guess, Chekhov's perfume. Luke comments on the perfume that Esme is wearing. He takes a big old, not at all creepy whiff and is like, oh, you smell so good.
There's a lot of creepy sniffing in this movie. It's weird.
A lot of creepy sniffing, yeah. I think the payoff will be that Luke will later recognize Esme in disguise because of her perfume. And it's at this point that I've realized that all of my Chekhov's whatever guesses for this movie are aerosols.
Or aerosolized. I like, those are good guesses. Yeah, I didn't pick up on any of that when I was watching. I was just like focused on the objects, and like all the objects seem to be very obvious, and also the payoff for the objects is really fast. So I'm like, I don't think this counts. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's where I feel like it's a little difficult where to draw the line with the Chekhov's gun too, because I do feel like it can't be too obvious, and there are some things where it's like, well, this is like the Bible was obviously a clue, you know, that type of thing. But
or like the painting obviously had a clue on it, you know, like they end up so obvious that they don't count.
Or at least it wouldn't be gratifying to be like, that's a Chekhov's gun.
Well, see, like that had a clue to the mystery. Weird.
Charlotte and Luke watch Charlotte's son Thomas playing piano at a performance. Charlotte thinks Luke is doing the wrong thing, leading the billionaire Owen on. Luke says, well, at least the guy is getting an adventure, which is more than he can say for Charlotte. Thomas apparently, supposedly, adores his uncle. Again, this is more telling without showing.
That kid had nothing going on behind his eyes.
I know, right? Seriously.
He was not interesting at all. Like, there was a perfect opportunity for this kid to be like the comic relief, and he just really wasn't.
Yeah, this character was frustrating to me because the precocious child character is typically so annoying to me. So when we're first introduced to Thomas, I'm like, oh, he's not the like comedic, funny, precocious child. He's more like staid. But after seeing him for more than like a minute, I'm like, okay, this character has no affect at all. He's totally boring. I would rather have like 3 short rounds in this movie than one Thomas.
Like later, Donald Gleason laughs at something he said, and I'm like, I don't understand why that was funny, because it was nothing. It must laugh to show you that that was a joke.
Yeah, and also Charlotte says something to Luke like, he couldn't stop talking about his uncle last time he saw you. And it's like, okay, like you maybe want to show on the screen that there's some sort of affection between these characters. No, you'll just tell us about it? Okay. I mean, that's what we're going with for the whole movie, apparently, with the love interest as well. So yeah, as you were saying, we cut to off the coast of Ireland. They are now going after the Lusitania's shipwreck, where the original Rembrandt is still held in a watertight safe.
Titanic.
They bring part of the wreckage to the surface with flotation devices. It seems like Charlotte finally has her head in the game. She's excited as they board the ship. I will admit, I do think that this was the most fun set piece of the movie. I liked the atmosphere of the Lusitania. So they've just raised it from the depths of the ocean, right? So the whole time they're inside, it's constantly dripping water. There's these groaning of the waterlogged boards of the ship.
I'm also like, those boards would not support them anymore. I feel like the ship would be just disintegrating around them as they were going. But I also just I liked the idea that they could just walk around in it after it's been underwater all this time. So I thought that was fun.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have the structural integrity to, remain upright when it's pulled from the depths. But, there's obviously other movies that have searching through shipwreck scenes. They're usually underwater for reasons. But I thought it was fun for them to be like, it's usually where you find shipwrecks, I thought it was a little bit fun to have it be a shipwreck above water. They reminisce about past adventures with their dad, and they talk more about the gold mask of the Inti sun god. Luke says their dad never found it, but Charlotte insists that he did. He just decided not to keep it. They crack the Vanderbilt safe and find the painting inside, but Esme and her team of armed protectors arrive by helicopter. They are also here for the painting. Another fight ensues, and the ship starts sinking. Esme holds Charlotte at gunpoint, but Luke still won't give up the painting. Besides, he doesn't think Esme will hurt his sister.
Also, his sister is apparently a big drinker, which is the new information we get. She's like, don't take anything that's not this painting. We can't take anything. And then she grabs some scotch or something out of another safe and just pours herself a glass and then just watches John Krasinski cracking the safe. And I was like, oh, her personality is sometimes she drinks a lot. Awesome.
Her personality is she's a wine mom. That scene was also disappointing to me because, so he's got the blowtorch for cracking the safe, right? And I was like, we have the ingredients you need for a Molotov cocktail here. We've got the alcohol, we've got the blowtorch. I thought they were going to improvise some sort of explosive whiskey device once they realized they were being attacked. So that was a little disappointing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
So this action scene, I do like the set piece of it being on the ship. I do kind of like that we have the ticking clock aspect because the flotation devices get shot and then the boat starts sinking. So they have to get off.
We have no backup plan. We'll just watch them sink. We don't have any other plans for this.
Oh, yes. And they conveniently lost radio contact with the rest of their team as well because, of course,
jamming the signal.
Only one man would dare give me the raspberry. Lone Star. But that being said, this was kind of a lackluster action scene. Like you were saying at the top of the movie, the action scenes weren't that compelling, especially compared to other contemporary movies like Mission Impossible or what have you. Unfortunately, I think that Guy Ritchie either pulls off a very good action scene or a very poor action scene. Sometimes he tends toward too frenetic where you can't even really tell what's going on.
The camera's flipping upside down and you're like, what is happening?
Yeah, anytime Esme is on scene here, whenever she does a flip kick or whatever, the camera sort of follows her, which is interesting, but also disorienting in a way that I don't necessarily think is the most effective for an action scene. For me, the best action scenes are ones where you can tell that there's real people doing real stunts and therefore it's impressive. And also with interestingly choreographed fights where it's not just like a bunch of fast cuts where you can't even see what's going on. And then on the other hand, Guy Ritchie does also like to employ slow-mo a lot, I think sometimes to too much of a degree. And this scene made me laugh because very briefly, for no reason that I can tell, Luke just starts thinking in slow motion and the whole scene is super slow-mo and they're talking like this. And I was like, is this like Sherlock-O-Vision? I thought we were going to get Sherlock-O-Vision.
I was like, what? What's happening here? Is this funny? I was like, I guess a little bit.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was meant to just be a joke, but obviously it didn't land for me.
I was like, okay.
Yes.
Moving on.
Yeah, so Esme was holding Charlotte at gunpoint. So by this scene, I think it's pretty obvious that by the end of the movie, we're going to have some sort of reversal with the Luke character. He'll have to choose his sister over the treasure by the end. So that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely telegraphed in this scene. And Charlotte, understandably, is pissed off that Luke risked her life in this way, but they do end up escaping from the sinking ship with the painting. In an interstitial scene, Charlotte's husband asks her to take Thomas with her for a year since he's accepted a contract overseas. Owen has pulled some strings to get Thomas and Charlotte together, and Charlotte agrees.
I love that it's just like instant. They're like, oh, he like had his, colleague call this guy and he's instantly going to be overseas for a year. Like, okay, but okay.
And I understand that it wouldn't be very compelling to have in an action movie, but they have absolutely no dialogue about, like, I don't know, their son's school year or uprooting him from his routine or what would be best to do for
No
Thomas.
plans for her to like pick him up and when that's going to happen and where. It's just you have to take him, right?
Okay.
That communicated everything I needed to know.
Now that they are in possession of all the paintings and their hidden letters, the team is able to decipher a message that points them to the Wicked Bible, a heretical Bible which had a misprint. But maybe the misprint wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was a deliberate way of marking the Bible and the path to the Fountain of Youth. So yeah, they're holding space for the Wicked Bible here.
Yeah, and obviously it has something to do with the Fountain of Youth because of reasons.
I understand, again, that this is like a trope of treasure movies, but it's so silly that if there were a treasure that were so dangerous to humanity, and yet there would be clues left in order to find it. It's just like, why are there clues?
Here's a question. Everything is in Latin, and then the clue is wicked in English, which doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
And I'm like, I guess it makes sense if it's like King James and
That's true.
it's called the Wicked Bible. It makes sense that it would be in English, but it was really weird. It like almost things feel like it should have been in Latin and then translated. But yeah, it was very odd.
And to make surely not the last Indiana Jones comparison, they solve this too quickly. Something that I like about in Raiders of the Lost Ark, for example, is that they don't immediately figure out where things are. There's noodling, there's sometimes
there's like
going down
another
dead
little
ends.
thing they have to do.
Yes.
Before you get there.
Yeah, so they really fast track over this treasure mumbo jumbo in a way that I felt was not very fun. It could have been fun. They are ambushed by Interpol, but then they're ambushed by the gangsters from Thailand. Another slow-mo fight ensues because Guy Ritchie. But Luke and his team escape. I thought it was very funny in this scene that Luke apparently just had to have that diegetic needle drop because he cranks up the speakers before the fight ensues. And I'm like, is that really necessary?
And I was like, he did that. Was that supposed to be like a deterrent? Like, why would you do that other than to provide a soundtrack for the fight?
Exactly. Also, it seems clear now that we're going to have the competing teams racing to the finish line of the treasure. Interpol is going to be there. The protectors are going to be there, which is a trope that I like in treasure movies.
Mm-hmm.
Luke has yet another strange dream, this time of him drinking from a glass of golden liquid, while Charlotte and Thomas languish in the dark shadows, as though he has to choose between his family and the prize.
Oh,
Foreshadowing
I wonder
much?
what's gonna happen. Also, it's not even like subtle foreshadowing. It's just this is exactly what's going to happen at the
Yes.
end.
Yes, it
They're
definitely
like,
holds your hand.
whoa, he drank a liquid and it killed his family. Whoa, what a thought.
The movie does not think the audience was very smart. Let's just say that.
Also, how is he having these premonitions? Is he magic? Like, there's no reason why he should be having these dreams like this. Like, it's very silly.
Plot contrivance dreams.
Mm-hmm.
But before we find out what happens next, let's take a quick break to hear a few ads. And we're back. Now they're all on the lam, including Thomas, and they are on one of Owen's private jets. Side note, I really love Charlotte's outfit in this scene. She's got the mixed prince thing going on.
Yeah, for sure. I did like that. And I also like you're looking at this plane, which is very, very, very fancy, of course, because he's a billionaire. And it also has like a bunch of like art and artifacts displayed around. It's like, this guy definitely has an interest in like one of a kind, expensive, elusive things. So interesting.
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 They arrive in Austria at the National Library to find the Wicked Bible. Esme and the Protectors crash the party, and she and Luke have another attempt at chemistry.
Also, I was like, they're panning around this library, and I'm playing my own game now, which is just to guess plot points and solve riddles. And I was like, they're in this big, echoey, beautiful library. I wonder if they are going to have to go through the floor, because that's what happens in The Last Crusade. So let's see.
Someone took the script of The Last Crusade and just like find and replace Indiana Jones with Luke.
And then they then they were watching The Mummy and they're like writing some notes in there. And then, some National Treasure maybe, but probably more of like some Dan Brown stuff in there, the Lost Symbol, that kind of stuff.
Luke manages to fight off the Protectors, and they gas the librarian, steal the Bible, and bust out of the library.
Through the floor. Yes, they set an explosive in the floor, and then they escape through the sewer, and they come up around unexpected people who don't expect people to just pop up out of the ground, just like happens in Last Crusade. Exactly the same thing.
Meanwhile, Owen also fights off a few Protectors himself and tells Thomas not to tell his mom. Again, another moment. Like, it doesn't seem like he's on the verge of death from liver cancer if he can fight off these guys. And also, Thomas, haven't you learned stranger danger? If an adult tells you not to tell your parents something,
that's probably bad.
Yeah, that's probably bad.
Yeah, it was like bad because he gives Thomas champagne, but it's like doubly bad because this guy's supposed to have liver cancer, and obviously he doesn't if he's drinking.
To Thomas's credit, he does tell his mom everything. And not only that, he helps them decode the clues along the outside of the Wicked Bible. It turns out it's musical notes.
And this is when I made yet another one of those predictions where they went, it's repeating numbers 1 through 7. And I was like, it's music. And then they're like cutting away and they're doing all this stuff and they have another scene and I'm like, it's music, it's music, it's music. Obviously it's music. And then there's no way to determine the rhythm of that music, what key it's in, but somehow Thomas magically does that by hand waving.
Yeah, it was very obvious that it was music, and also they had strongly foreshadowed this with Thomas. Luke says that he's a genius, so we're like, okay, the musical genius kid is gonna figure it out. Obviously, it's music, yada yada. So they fire up Shazam for treasure hunters and identify Water in the Desert, a song about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A map overlay leads them to the pyramids of Egypt, but Charlotte's definitely not coming with them this time. Cue another Gilligan cut. And of course, we have to be at the pyramids.
Also, why does it have to have so many clues like leading to the pyramids? Like, the pyramids are the only wonder of the world still left. So like there doesn't need to be a map overlay or anything like that. They can just be like, 7 wonders of the world, the pyramids are the only ones that are left. Let's go there.
And they can also be like, since I've watched a bunch of treasure hunting movies, I know that we have to end up in ancient Egypt at some point.
Oh yeah, of course.
Luke has yet another dream of the golden Inti sun god mask. This time, a shadowed man collapses before him, and a dark energy consumes Luke. Luke wakes up, and he and Charlotte discuss whether Owen has ulterior motives, you think? And whether he has plans to sell the miraculous waters. What do they really know about this guy, after all? So, they're a little slow on the uptake.
This is where I had made a prediction that Owen was going to show up and have the opportunity to drink the water, and that he was going to choose poorly, like the end of Last Crusade, and it was going to destroy him.
He chose poorly.
I'm totally winning my own game that I was playing on the side.
Cut to Vatican City, because that's where Stanley Tucci lives now. Esme meets with a mysterious elder, Stanley Tucci, who's concerned that Luke and his team have the Bible. Esme and the elder are part of a centuries-old order that's devoted their lives to keeping the fountain a secret and concealing its true power from mankind, protecting them from it. Stanley Tucci tells her, no more Mr. Nice Guy, and gives her a strange key for help in dealing with Luke and everyone else.
And then I was like, I don't even think this counts for me to say Chekhov's key obviously this is going to unlock something, but they don't really show it. So it kind of looked like it could be a key or it could be a dagger. And I'm like, obviously this is going to unlock something. But I also went further and I was like, since it's kind of like a dagger, like maybe someone gets impaled on it. And
Oh,
so that
yeah.
was my guess. And also now I'm remembering back that in the other episode of Chekhov's, whatever I was on, I think I guessed impaling again, and they just never impale people like I want them to.
You should have been on my Death of a Unicorn episode. There was all the
All sorts
impaling
of
in that
impaling.
episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Cut back to Cairo, Egypt. They enter one of the pyramids of Giza to explore its secret chambers. All the teams are now converging for the big showdown. Luke's team, Owen's mercenaries, Esme and the Protectors of the Path, and Interpol. A firefight ensues outside of the pyramid. Inside the pyramid, Owen starts to break bad. He doesn't have time to mess around and brute forces his way into the secret chamber. He also wants to blow up the keystone that they are having trouble deciphering. But Thomas, good old Thomas, figures out the secret to the Keystone Chamber. It's more music.
Also, it doesn't make any sense. It's this crazy contraption he never would have heard before. And even a prodigy, you would have at least had to like poke around on it and like hear the tones that it was making. But he was like instantly playing the thing. And I was like, okay.
And also, being good at one instrument doesn't necessarily translate to being good at a bunch of instruments unless you practice. I mean, you know, there are some Wunder kids, of course.
And also the piano is very straightforward compared to other instruments. Like it's all laid out in front of you. This was obviously this, you know, ancient Egyptian instrument was not like all the tones were like lined up in the proper order. Like, I don't know. It was not an intuitive thing that he would have just been able to do. I don't think, even if he was a crazy prodigy.
And it magically stayed tuned over centuries.
Oh yeah, totally. Tuned enough to like hit the exact tones that you needed to open the thingy.
It also felt very arbitrary and just merely for plot reasons that so many of the clues were musical, because it's like, what's the correlation with the Fountain of Youth?
The Fountain of Youth, yeah.
No, but it does have to do with Thomas, so I guess that's the reason why it exists in the movie. So yeah, Thomas plays on these handpan-like drums. There's a giant bell, and the entire chamber resonates eerily. The keystone slides away to reveal a giant golden scarab inlaid on the floor. It's an elevator, and they start descending on it. Luke, Charlotte, Thomas, and Owen proceed into the depths, while Esme and the lead Interpol guy make it inside too. From there, finding the fountain is super easy, barely an inconvenience, to quote one of my favorite YouTubers, Pitch Meeting. Charlotte finds some amber to put into a slot that's like a foot away. It's like, okay, that's
that was challenging. It's literally, this amber ball, and put it in the circular slot.
Yeah, it fits in this ball-shaped depression. Who could have guessed?
I pretended it had meaning beyond like a simple like child's toy where like you put the shapes inside. And she was just like rattling off why it made sense, and I was like, it's just like shapes, man. You're just matching shapes.
Put the square peg in the square hole. Do it. They twist the scarab to reveal a staircase, an aperture opens, and it reveals an unimpressive, unassuming puddle of water. Owen pressures Luke to drink the water first to be the guinea pig. Owen goes fully mask off at this point. He's the bad guy. Duh. He's not dying after all, and he's not about to risk himself to test the waters, literally. He shoots Luke in the arm to force him to use the fountain. Luke touches the water and it rises, filling the basin. Then it swirls around him, surrounds him, and lifts him into the air. Awed, he stares into the golden liquid cupped in his palms and gazes into his own reflection.
And it's just like the dream he had already.
So I had a question about this point. I got the impression when he was looking at his reflection that they were sort of trying to subtly de-age him, like Fountain of Youth style.
Like he has a lot of like he does a lot of forehead acting, so he has like lines across his forehead, and then those were gone. Yeah, so it's like they were removing his age, and I was like, it was done digitally very awkwardly. I'm like,
yes,
there's like a lot of footage of John Krasinski. We couldn't have like kind of made that work like we did with Indiana Jones, but yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I feel like the effect was both not impressive and also maybe too subtle, because I feel like I didn't quite get it for a moment. I was like, is his face changing? And then I was like, oh, I see. It's showing him getting younger. But
also, Donald Gleason looks into the water and it doesn't look like he looks younger. And I was like, wait, what? Why?
It was just strange. And also the CGI It was a little bit uncanny valley to the point where I was like, for a second, I thought the reflection was showing him his father. Like I said, I was confused.
Entirely. Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but I got it in the end. Don't worry. I'm not as dumb as the movie thinks I am.
Also, that scene took forever. It's like he's rising into the air for an eternity and he's staring into the water for a year. And I was like, Can we move on? We already know what happens. He's not going to drink the water because it'll kill his family. We already, like, this has already been given away.
We get it, movie. But no, we don't, because it needs to spell it out, because right when he's about to drink the water, he sees a vision of Charlotte and Thomas cowering in fear, their life being drained from them. He doesn't drink, but his arm does heal, ? Owen shoots him several more times to test the fountain's limits, and Luke is healed. This is another point where I have a question, maybe a bit nitpicky, but I'm like, he didn't drink the water, but he is healed of these lethal gunshot wounds. So I'm at this point presuming that touching the water merely cures you, but drinking from it bestows the unfathomable power that we learn about in just a moment.
Well, they do say there is a line before this scene that they're reading on the wall, I think, and translating, and it's like, the thirsty man will be doomed, but the man who does not drink, blah, blah, blah. So it's like he has the opportunity to drink and he doesn't drink, and then he gets the reward of his healing from that. That was what my impression of it was, but it was, a little confusing.
Yeah, I guess I just would have assumed that he would need to partake of the water to be healed in any way.
Point. Like,
yeah.
Well, and it's like, is it really... then he's not really sacrificing anything if he's going to be healed anyway. But I guess he's not going to become, like, youth rewind isn't going to happen. Like, he's going to become all-knowing and he's going to become younger again and powerful. He's not going to do that, but it's still he doesn't have to really sacrifice anything that he currently has because he gets healed anyway.
Yeah. So since it seems to have worked for Luke, Owen decides to try it out for himself. Esme takes the key that she was given to shut down the fountain if the wrong person were ever to be seduced by its powers. We get a little bit of a flashback explanation because, surprise, surprise, the fountain is not all as it seems. If you drink from it, the fountain must take life from those that you love most. But if it's yourself that you value the most, there will be no exchange, only a direct connection to infinite, merciless power beyond human comprehension.
I'm so glad they explained all that to us as well as showing it, because I was like, what's it going to do to him? He doesn't have anyone he loves around. Like, he didn't bring two convenient loved ones along with him. Like, what's it going to do?
I thought this was funny because he does have a random henchman with him at this point. And I was like, does he secretly love his henchman?
That would have been so funny. That would have been cool if they're like secret lovers.
They're like, wait, this isn't my henchman. This is my husband.
My husband. Da, da, da. It's my brother. It's something. Yeah.
Right? This is seemingly too much power for one person to wield. This is a very Ark of the Covenant scene, I feel like. Don't look into the holy power unless you can handle it, which you can't because you're just a mere mortal.
Yeah, very drink from the grail and destroys
yes.
you. Yeah.
So Owen does drink from the fountain, and for a moment he is imbued with cosmic power, but the immensity of it all overpowers him, and his life force begins to drain away. He withers under the enormity of it all and is destroyed. So I do have a question for the protectors of the fountain at this point. Like, why don't they just, camp out at the fountain?
They should beat us around the fountain. Yeah, I guess it's, to avoid them being tempted by the fountain, but also, same thing with, the Grail Knights in Crusade. I guess they're trying to avoid people getting there, but also, I don't know, they could have done better. Also, why doesn't someone just hanging out with the magic key and then they
yes.
someone does the thing and then they just use the key?
Yes.
Why not keep that nearby instead of in Vatican City? That's so far away.
Yeah, what if someone off their radar had stumbled upon the fountain?
And they're like,
oh shit, where's the key? Get the key.
The Pope's got the key.
They use a lot of resources and manpower globetrotting to stop people from ever reaching the fountain. I just feel like it'd be more efficient if they just stayed at the fountain. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm not a member of a centuries-old order.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows what the rules are.
Esme uses the key to close off the fountain, and the chamber begins to collapse around them, but they all escape. Whew. Esme says goodbye to Luke. She hints that she looks forward to continuing their game of cat and mouse, and kisses Luke on the cheek because this is the most sexless adventure movie ever.
Also, I'm like, oh, good, they're gonna have another movie. Please no.
Oh, right. They definitely do optimistically set this up for a sequel. Luke admits to Charlotte that he didn't find what he was looking for, and maybe their dad was right all along. Maybe it is all about the journey. Reconciled, the siblings decide to set their sights on their next big adventure together. And Thomas pipes up saying, I've got an idea of what they can look for. Like I said, overly ambitious hopes for a sequel. The end. That's the anticlimactic ending of Fountain of Youth. Yay.
Yay. Like nothing interesting happens or unexpected happens. Gosh, just so many movies do this better. It kind of made me want to watch all of the movies that do this a little better, like The Mummy and Indiana Jones, all of those guys.
Yes. What I want at the end of the day from a treasure hunting adventure romp movie is that I just want it to be fun. I expect plot holes. I expect silly supernatural stuff. I expect the treasure hunting mumbo jumbo. But as long as it's all fun and transportive, that's what I'm there for. And this movie wasn't particularly fun.
No, because like even National Treasure is fun, like with its silliness. But I just think that movie's so fun. Like, why is this one not any fun? Other than Natalie Portman was around to be a bummer.
I do feel like she was the saving grace of the movie. Even though she was the bummer killjoy archetype, you still sided with her because Luke was so annoying. I'm like, yeah, she has a point, actually.
Yeah, like she was like, don't steal that Rembrandt. Don't steal this priceless Bible. Like, we're going to end up in jail. And he's like, let me put it in my pocket. Like, she's right. The whole time, she's right.
She's definitely right. Also, speaking of her and her relationship with Luke, I feel like there's a real missed opportunity here for having a sibling relationship at the forefront of the movie. There were a couple scenes where there are like glimpses of sibling banter that rang true for me. Like they both rally around the fact that Charlotte's husband is being a dick. And it's at that point where you do get the glimpse of Luke being the older brother and he cares about his little sister and they can sort of bond over this annoying thing that's going on. But that's really the only glimpse of it. And anytime they needle each other or tease each other, it just felt sort of mean-spirited to me. It didn't feel like that.
It didn't feel brother-sister.
No, it didn't feel like that loving sibling banter. I mean, you have a brother, I have a brother. I did not see much of my relationship with my brother in this movie or any sort of believable sibling relationship.
I'm wondering, do these actors have siblings? Because I feel like it seemed like they were very divorced from the concept of having a sibling. Yeah,
definitely. I will say a couple things I did like about the movie. I liked the set piece on the Lusitania. I thought that it was a good looking movie. They clearly had a high budget. It felt very slick. I like the globe-trotting aspect of it. I did feel a little bit transported to some of these places, or even some of the smaller set pieces. I really liked the train. I thought the train, I was like, oh, I want to be on a train, So if a movie evokes that feeling to me, like, I want to be there, that looks cool. There were some posh-looking libraries and hotel lobbies that just made me really want to travel, which, that's a huge part of movies like this. It has a little bit of escapism to it.
Yeah, like that's something, like we both been to Europe relatively recently and it was like, oh yeah, I've been to that place or near this place. That's cool. I wish they were doing more fun things in those places.
Yeah, it was not a fun movie, which is too bad. It was forgettable. I found myself taking notes about the movie during action scenes because I was a little bit bored. Those are the scenes where I should be paying the most attention, right? That's when I should be riveted. But instead I was like, oh, here's a good time for me to take notes and I won't miss any plot points.
Yeah, for sure. And like, there were so many things like, oh, and then they had to do this. And then like 25 sets of stairs come out and take forever and then they go down the stairs and I'm like, okay, I don't think we need any more things. Though I did think it was kind of funny when they're like made Luke go first, like down the hallway. I'm like, if this was Indiana Jones, he would definitely, there would be like projectiles or like
Yeah,
poison darts and like all kinds of things shooting out from the side of those this like creepy hallway he had to crawl down.
totally. Sadly, though, not everyone can have the charisma of Harrison Ford. And I do feel like this movie, on the micro and macro level, it was missing that riz. It was missing that charisma. There just wasn't much soul to this movie, which is too bad. I feel like all the elements were there, but they did not come together.
I know. And I was like, originally so excited when I kept seeing the previews. I'm like, these actors and a fun adventure movie. And I was like, oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. So, would you go on a treasure hunt with your little brother? And what would you be searching for?
Definitely, but if you started just like pocketing like really rare antiquities and stuff, I'd be like, well, what are we doing here? And I'd also be very concerned about why that was suddenly a thing that he did. But yeah, we would definitely, I think, be good at solving puzzles together.
Nice. Very good.
Would you go on an adventure with your brother? A globe-trotting adventure?
I would say in theory, yes, but in practice, my brother is a big old scaredy cat and he hasn't been on a plane in, I want to say, like 20 years or something. So I feel like it'd be very difficult to go on a globe-trotting adventure with him.
Like it would take a really long time to get places because
Yeah.
he doesn't want to fly.
Yeah, we'd have to take like a boat to get across the ocean. The competing treasure hunting parties would definitely get there before us.
Yeah, for sure. But it would help that your nephews are like actual human children and not like this dude
Not
that
like Thomas.
has nothing going on.
If there's any clues surrounding Pokemon,
They
then
would
my
definitely
nephews
find
will
them.
definitely hack it. Yeah.
My nephew is too young to help, unfortunately, but he would be very cute.
You'll have to raise him as a treasure hunter.
Oh yeah.
All right, so that's going to do it for Fountain of Youth. Now it's time to move on to the game and find out who won. First up was your guess, Chekhov's Inti mask. Remind the listener what your guess was for the payoff of that one.
I thought the Inti mask was going to be a thing we were actually going to see eventually, like
Yes.
not just a dream remembrance, but like an actual object, and that it was going to be really important to this current quest. And my specific guess was it was going to be the key to unlocking the Fountain of Youth, but that was not correct. And it just ended up being a kind of metaphor / life lesson in the end. So I definitely didn't identify a Chekhov's gun in this case.
Yeah, sadly, subtracting points for that one. I feel like though you homed in on all the hallmarks of a Chekhov's gun. And also in that very first dream scene, it wasn't clear whether this was going to happen in the future or was a memory. It did certainly seem like it was something prophetic that was going to happen later. So I feel like that was a good guess.
And the rest of his dreams were just straight up prophecy.
Yes.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Inconsistent dreams, John Krasinski. The next Chekhov's whatever was my guess, Chekhov's knockout gas. This did come back. I predicted that Natalie was going to learn from her big brother, emulate her big brother, and use the knockout gas to knock out a bad guy. Instead, Luke ended up using it to knock out the librarian so that they could steal the Wicked Bible. I do feel like this had a setup and a payoff. I feel like the movie could have progressed without it.
It was very
but also
weird. Like they were all sniffing all of a sudden, and I was like, "What? What?" It's just such an awkward scene.
I think ultimately I would count it as a Chekhov's gun because it did have a payoff and they did need to dispatch of the librarian in some way to get the Wicked Bible, which was pretty important to the plot going forward. So I would give myself partial points for that.
Yeah, it like paid off, but it didn't do it wasn't exactly in that same way. But yeah.
Yeah. My next guess was Chekhov's perfume. This did not have a payoff. It did not come back at all. Not a thing.
It was just John Krasinski's character being a creep. He sniffs a lot. That was like one of his characteristics, apparently.
So charming. And finally, we have your guess, Chekhov's Key-Dagger.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay, obviously this is supposed to be a key, but maybe that's too obvious and like someone's going to end up impaled on a dagger. But it also happened really late in the movie. And so I was like, I don't think this fully counts as a Chekhov's gun or Chekhov's whatever. And no one was impaled. I feel like I don't get credit for that one.
Yes, obviously no one got impaled. I do feel like, though, even though it was introduced later in the movie, like you said, it wasn't introduced in Act 1. But I don't know if that's like a hard and fast rule. It did have a setup and a payoff. As you also mentioned, it's kind of vague what it is when it's first presented.
Yeah, like they're hiding it so it doesn't look obviously like a key. So yeah, maybe partial points, but it's just this movie like did such obvious things with its objects.
Yes.
It's like, oh, this is so obvious it like doesn't even really count. It's not like we're not clever to have noticed that he hands her this key.
I do almost feel like it's too textual to be
a
Chekhov's
like
gun, technically.
Obviously, oh, here is this to help. And
yeah. So I would do, I don't know.
If it's partial points, it's like maybe like 1 out of 4 points or something like that. 25% of a point.
We'll do partial. All right, and that was all of our guesses. Give me just a moment while I calculate the points. Beep, boop, beep. Okay, not our best showing.
But like I guessed too many things last time I was here, and I was like, I'm just going to keep it simple. And then I was like, are there any things
that
aren't just like blazingly obvious? Oh God.
So at the end of the day, with all of our partial points and misguesses, Jen, you have 0 points and I have 1 point. Technically the winner.
Nice.
Eking out the win. Jen, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast and for suffering through this frankly stinker of a movie with me.
Well, thank you for having me, and I was definitely going to watch it anyway because of all the things that seemed so appealing about it on the surface. Maybe they just needed more Stanley Tucci and less of everyone else.
Yeah, on paper it reads like a very Jen movie. It's like, oh yeah.
It's like, was this written for me? And then
totally.
It's not good.
Well, I'm sorry that they pulled out the rug from under you like that. Very rude. Very rude
of them.
All right, Jen. Well, until next time, where can the listeners find you online?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty much not on any other type of social media at Nerdified Jen.
Awesome. And for everyone listening, please do follow me on YouTube. That's Chekhov's Whatever podcast. Did you know that YouTube is the top platform for podcasts these days? Crazy. I know. I don't get it either. But please go over there, like, subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Chekhov's Whatever. Go to chekhovswhatever.substack.com to follow along with the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a positive review. You can also find video clips and full audio episodes on YouTube, so be sure to like and subscribe at Chekhov's Whatever. And finally, you can send email to chekhovswhateverpodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's end this show with a bang.